The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Kepler Station, with all the subtlety of a thunderstorm. 50 warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls scarred from decades of conflict and humanity's expansion to the stars. Each vessel bore the distinctive angular design of human engineering, built for function rather than beauty, with armor thick enough to stop asteroids and weapons that could crack moons. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UNS Valiant, watching as the Alien Reception Committee scrambled to organize themselves. Her weathered face showed the kind of confidence that came from surviving 3 major wars and countless smaller conflicts. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, rebellious colonies on the outer rim, and hostile alien species that had tried to claim human territory. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Sam Foster from the communications station, "we're receiving approach vectors from Kepler Station Traffic Control." "They seem nervous about our formation." Lisa smiled grimly. "I imagine they are, Lieutenant. They invited wolves to dinner, and now they're wondering if they made the right choice." The Alien Welcoming Committee was led by Commander Veltara, an Altarian whose graceful form and delicate features marked her as a member of one of the galaxy's most peaceful species. Her large eyes went wide as she reviewed the scanner readings from the human fleet. "Commander," her aide whispered urgently, "these ships register as warships, not exploration vessels. Each one carries enough firepower to level a city." Veltara nodded slowly, her tentacles curling with nervousness. "I see that. What I don't understand is why they need so much firepower for exploration." The answer came when Admiral Hayes transported aboard Kepler Station for the formal greeting ceremony. She strode through the docking bay like she owned it, her military bearing making even the station's security forces step back. Behind her came a squad of human Marines in full combat armor, their weapons powered down but clearly visible. "Admiral Hayes," Commander Veltara greeted her, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Welcome to Kepler Station. I must ask, are your ships always so heavily armed?" "Commander," Lisa replied with a predatory smile, "where we come from, there's no such thing as a peaceful exploration. Every ship that leaves Earth is built to fight because everything in our galaxy has tried to kill us at least once." The cultural exchange sessions that followed were exercises in barely controlled horror for the alien representatives. Dr. Kevin Park, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, had been assigned to explain human biology to the alien scientists. What started as a routine briefing quickly became a nightmare for his audience. "The average human can survive in environments that would kill most galactic species," Dr. Park explained casually. "We evolved on a world where the atmosphere itself was poisonous to early life forms, where massive predators hunted our ancestors, and where natural disasters could wipe out entire populations without warning." He activated a holographic display showing Earth's ecosystem. The alien scientists leaned forward with interest until they saw what humanity had shared their world with. Giant carnivores with teeth like swords, venomous creatures no bigger than a finger that could kill in minutes, and weather patterns that could level entire continents. "This cannot be accurate," whispered Dr. Thysick, a gentle Federation scientist whose species had evolved on a garden world where the most dangerous creature was roughly equivalent to a butterfly. "No intelligent species could evolve under such conditions. Not only did we evolve there," Dr. Park continued with obvious pride, "we became the apex predators. Humans learned to hunt creatures 10 times our size using nothing but sharp sticks and teamwork. We turned fire into a tool, poison into medicine, and violence into an art form." 3 alien scientists required medical attention after viewing footage of human recreational activities. The concept of extreme sports was so foreign to their peaceful minds that they experienced what human doctors would have recognized as panic attacks. Meanwhile, in the military briefing rooms, Marine Colonel Tony Rodriguez was demonstrating standard human combat techniques to a group of alien military observers. What should have been a routine presentation turned into something that would haunt the aliens' dreams for years to come. "Human soldiers are trained to continue fighting, through injuries that would incapacitate most species," Rodriguez explained as he demonstrated combat moves on a training dummy. "We can function with broken bones, internal bleeding, severe burns, and massive blood loss." He showed them training footage of human Marines practicing combat in conditions that the aliens found horrifying. Soldiers fighting while wearing masks that simulated severe oxygen deprivation, warriors continuing to operate after being subjected to pain levels that would render most species unconscious. Teams working together seamlessly even when half their members were simulating serious wounds. On Earth, Rodriguez continued, we have a saying, pain is just weakness leaving the body. Our soldiers are trained to use pain as information, rather than letting it stop them from completing their mission. Commander Veltara watched the demonstration with growing unease. Colonel Rodriguez, what you're describing sounds like torture rather than training. Commander, Rodriguez replied with a grin that showed too many teeth. What we call training, most species would call impossible survival scenarios. The difference is that we volunteer for it. The psychological profiles that the aliens had compiled on humanity suddenly made terrible sense. These weren't just warriors. They were a species that had been forged in the fires of a world that actively tried to kill them every single day. Violence wasn't an aberration for humans. It was their natural state. Dr. Elena Martinez, the fleet's chief medical officer, provided the final piece of the puzzle during her presentation on human physiology. Her casual explanations of human biological capabilities left the alien medical staff in shocked silence. Humans produce natural chemicals called adrenaline and endorphins when threatened, she explained. To a room full of alien doctors. These chemicals suppress pain, increase strength and speed, and enhance cognitive function. Essentially, humans become stronger and smarter when they're in danger. She showed them brain scans of humans in combat situations. The alien doctors stared in amazement at neural activity that spiked far beyond what should have been possible for any organic brain. Additionally, Dr. Martinez continued, humans can enter a psychological state called battle rage, where they become almost immune to pain and fear. In this state, a single human can fight multiple opponents with a ferocity that defies logical analysis. Doctor, stammered a Velnari medic, what you're describing sounds like a berserker state. Our records suggest that such conditions are always temporary and usually fatal. For most species, yes, Dr. Martinez agreed. For humans, it's a natural survival mechanism that can be controlled and directed. We train our soldiers to enter and exit this state at will. The revelation that humans could deliberately trigger their own combat madness sent several alien medical personnel into what their species considered catatonic shock. Captain Ryan Clark, commander of the destroyer UNS Wolverine, summed up the human approach to warfare during his presentation on naval tactics. His casual attitude toward concepts that terrified the aliens revealed just how different humanity's approach to conflict really was. Human naval doctrine is based on a simple principle, Clark explained as he showed tactical displays to the alien military planners. We don't retreat, we don't surrender, and we don't leave our dead behind. Every engagement is fought as if the survival of our entire species depends on the outcome. He showed them battle footage from humanity's expansion wars. The aliens watched in stunned silence as human ships continued fighting even when they were clearly doomed, ramming enemy vessels when their weapons failed, and fighting boarding actions in the vacuum of space when their hulls were breached. Captain Clark, Commander Veltara asked quietly, don't your people fear death? Clark considered the question seriously. Commander, fear is just another tool. We learned long ago to use it instead of being controlled by it. Every human in this fleet knows they might die in the coming war, and every one of them chose to be here anyway. The aliens began to understand that they had not simply invited warriors to join their fight against the Vorthak. They had unleashed something that viewed warfare as a natural state, that treated impossible odds as a personal challenge, and that considered death in battle to be an acceptable outcome, rather than something to be avoided at all costs. As the cultural exchange continued, reports began filtering in from the outer rim. The Vorthak Empire was accelerating their advance, consuming worlds faster than anyone had predicted. Their bioships were adapting to the galaxy's defenses, learning from each engagement and becoming more efficient killers. But for the first time since the crisis began, the aliens felt something other than despair. They watched the humans preparing for war with an enthusiasm that bordered on celebration, saw them treating the impossible odds as merely another challenge to overcome. Admiral Hayes received the latest intelligence reports on the Vorthak advance while reviewing her fleet's combat readiness. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of bioships, millions of living weapons. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles under a dome of pure crystal that showed the stars beyond. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their special chairs and breathing chambers, each one designed for their unique biology. The air hummed with the sound of translation devices working to convert hundreds of different languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center of the hall, his crystalline body catching the light from the dome above. His people, the Velnari, were known throughout the galaxy for their calm nature and peaceful ways. They had not fought a war in over 3,000 years, but today, fear made his crystal form shake like a leaf in the wind. Honored council members, Zethkar began, his voice carrying through the hall with the help of the speakers built into every seat. I come before you not as a representative of my people, but as a voice for all the species that still draw breath in this galaxy. The hall grew quiet. Even the constant hum of life support systems seemed to fade as every eye sensor and optical organ focused on the trembling ambassador. The Vorthak Empire has awakened from their long sleep in the dark space between galaxies, Zethkar continued. They have already consumed 17 star systems. My homeworld of Velnara Prime was the first to fall. I watched from our moon base as their bioships covered our sky like a plague of locusts. A ripple of movement went through the assembled representatives. The Vorthak were a legend, a nightmare story that parents told their young to make them behave. They were supposed to be extinct, wiped out in the Great War that happened before most current species had even discovered fire. They do not negotiate. Zethkar's voice cracked with emotion. They do not trade or communicate. They simply consume everything in their path. Their ships are alive, growing stronger with each world they devour. Their armies are not soldiers, but living weapons bred only to kill and destroy. Elder Mirathon, the ancient leader of the Altarian delegation, raised one of her many tentacles. Her species was among the oldest in the galaxy, and their memory went back to the First Vorthak War. Ambassador Zethkar, are you certain these are truly the Vorthak? We have records that suggest they were completely destroyed. I have brought proof, Zethkar replied, activating a holographic projector in the center of the hall. The image that appeared made several representatives gasp in horror. The hologram showed a Vorthak bioship in all its terrible glory. It looked like a cross between a giant insect and a machine, with organic armor that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Weapons that looked like the stingers of enormous wasps protruded from its hull. Smaller creatures, clearly alive but shaped like spacecraft, swarmed around it like antibodies protecting a disease. This recording was taken by our deep space monitors just before they went dark, Zethkar explained. Notice how the ship actually bleeds when damaged, how it heals itself even as it attacks our defense platforms. The hologram showed the bioship firing streams of acid that melted through metal like butter. When the defenders shot back, the damage to the creature's hide sealed itself within minutes. Worst of all, the ship seemed to learn from each attack, adapting its defenses in real time. 17 worlds, Zethkar repeated. Billions of lives consumed to feed their growth. And they are just getting started. Our military experts estimate they will reach the core worlds within 6 months. Commander Veltara of the Altarian Defense Force stood up. Her people had the most advanced military in the council, but even she looked pale as she studied the hologram. What exactly are you asking of us, Ambassador? We need warriors, Zethkar said simply. Not diplomats, not traitors, not scientists. We need killers who can match the Vorthak for pure, brutal violence. We need a species that understands war at the most basic level. The hall erupted in nervous chatter. The Galactic Council had been founded on principles of peace and cooperation. Most member species had evolved past the need for large military forces. They solved problems through trade, negotiation, and scientific advancement. The idea of deliberate violence was foreign to most of them. Ambassador, said High Counselor Threndok, his beetle-like form clicking with agitation, you are asking us to become monsters to fight monsters. Surely there must be another way. There is no other way, Zethkar replied with desperate certainty. I have seen their efficiency. They treat war like farming, harvesting entire civilizations with the same casual attitude we might use to pick fruit. Only something equally ruthless can stop them. Elder Mirathon's tentacles writhed as she accessed her people's vast databases. There is one possibility, she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. But the cure might be worse than the disease. What do you mean? Commander Veltara asked. The humans from Sol 3, Mirathon replied. They have been requesting membership in the Council for over 50 years. Each time we have rejected their application. Why? Several voices asked at once. Their homeworld is classified as a Class 2 Deathworld, Marathon explained. According to our surveys, it is a planet where evolution itself seems designed to create the ultimate predators. The dominant species, Homo sapiens, had to fight for survival against creatures that would be considered mythical monsters on most worlds. She activated her own hologram, showing images that made the assembled aliens recoil in horror. Giant reptiles with teeth like swords, massive mammals with crushing jaws, tiny creatures whose venom could kill in seconds, and plants that could strangle grown beings. The humans not only survived on this nightmare world, Marathon continued, they became its apex predators. They turned fire into a tool, metal into weapons, and their own aggression into an art form. Our psychological profiles suggest they are too dangerous for civilized society. Dangerous how? Zethkar asked, though hope was beginning to show in his crystalline features. They seem incapable of surrendering, Marathon replied. Even when faced with impossible odds, they continue fighting. They have a cultural concept they call going down swinging, which roughly translates to fighting until death even when victory is impossible. Their history is filled with examples of small groups holding off vastly superior forces through sheer stubbornness. Commander Veltara studied the human data with growing amazement. These readings cannot be correct. It says here that they regularly engage in recreational activities that would be considered torture by most species. They climb mountains for fun, swim in water cold enough to cause hypothermia, and engage in combat sports where the goal is to deliberately harm the opponent. The data is accurate, Marathon confirmed. They call it extreme sports and consider it entertainment. Their neural chemistry actually rewards them for facing danger. What about their technology? Asked High Counselor Threndok. Primitive by our standards, but effective, Marathon replied. Everything they build is designed for durability rather than elegance. Their spacecraft are essentially flying weapons platforms. They have no dedicated exploration vessels because they design every ship to fight. Zethkar felt something he had not experienced since watching his homeworld burn. He felt hope. Where are they now? Still in their home system, still sending us membership requests that we file away and ignore, Marathon said. They know we exist, but we have maintained minimal contact to avoid contaminating civilized space with their violent tendencies. Contact them, Zethkar said immediately. Tell them the Galactic Council formally invites humanity to join our alliance. Ambassador, Commander Veltara said carefully, are you certain about this? We would be unleashing a species of natural killers into the galaxy. The Vorthak are already here, Zethkar replied grimly. At least the humans might be willing to kill them instead of us. The vote was close, but desperation won out over caution. Within hours, a quantum message was racing toward the Sol system, carrying the Council's first official communication with humanity. It was an invitation that would change the galaxy forever, though none of them realized just how much. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee aboard the exploration vessel UES Ranger when the message arrived. After 50 years of rejection, the Galactic Council was finally ready to meet humanity. Jake smiled as he read the desperate tone hidden beneath the diplomatic language. These aliens needed something, and they needed it badly enough to contact the species they had been avoiding for half a century. Lieutenant Amy Carter, Jake called to his tactical officer. Send a reply to the Galactic Council. Tell them humanity accepts their invitation with enthusiasm. As the message raced back toward Council space, Jake began making preparations for humanity's introduction to galactic society. He had a feeling it was going to be quite an education for everyone involved. The first battle came sooner than anyone expected. The Vorthak biofleet emerged from dark space at the Nexus Relay, a crucial hyperspace junction that connected 12 star systems to the Galactic Trade Network. Long-range sensors detected the enemy force while it was still 3 hours away, but their speed of approach suggested they would arrive much faster than conventional ships. Commander Veltara stood in the Joint Command Center aboard Kepler Station, watching the tactical displays with growing dread. The Vorthak fleet consisted of 47 bioships, each one the size of a city and pulsing with organic energy. They moved through space like a school of predatory fish, their formation shifting and adapting as they approached their target. Admiral Hayes, Veltara called through the communication system, We're tracking 47 enemy vessels approaching the Nexus relay. Our combined fleet number's only 38 ships. Shouldn't we fall back to a more defensible position? The response from the human admiral came immediately, and her tone carried an emotion that Veltara had never heard from a military commander before. Anticipation. Commander, we're not falling back. Admiral Hayes replied with obvious satisfaction. We're finally getting the chance to see what these bugs can really do. All ships advance to intercept. Let's go introduce ourselves. Veltara watched in amazement as the human fleet broke formation and began accelerating toward the approaching Vorthak armada. This was exactly the opposite of what any sane military doctrine would recommend. The humans were deliberately seeking out a fight against superior numbers with enthusiasm that bordered on madness. Captain Ryan Clark's destroyer, the UNS Wolverine, led the charge. His ship's engines burned at maximum power as he raced ahead of the main fleet, apparently eager to be the first to engage the enemy. Behind him, the rest of the human vessels followed in loose formation, their weapon systems already charging for combat. Captain Clark, Admiral Hayes's voice crackled over the communication network. You're moving awfully fast there. Try to leave some for the rest of us. No promises, Admiral. Clark replied with a laugh that made the alien observers exchange worried glances. These bugs picked the wrong day to threaten human space. The Vorthak bioships responded to the human advance by accelerating their own approach. Their formation tightened into what looked like a massive arrowhead, with the largest vessel at the point. Bioplasma weapons began charging along their hulls, creating an eerie green glow that pulsed in rhythm with the ship's heartbeats. When the two fleets met, the result defied every tactical prediction the aliens had made. Instead of forming defensive lines and engaging at long range, the humans did something unprecedented. They charged straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Clark's destroyer struck first, diving between two Vorthak bioships and firing everything he had at point-blank range. His ship's armor sparked and buckled under return fire, but Clark pressed his attack with the single-minded determination of a predator pursuing wounded prey. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. Clark's voice rang out over the communication channels. Let's show these bugs what happens when you threaten our territory. The Vorthak bioship he targeted was 3 times larger than his destroyer, but Clark didn't hesitate. He aimed his vessel directly at the creature's center mass and fired his engines at maximum burn. The collision when it came was spectacular. The destroyer's reinforced prow punched through the bioship's organic armor like a spear through flesh. The alien vessel screamed across multiple frequencies as its living hull was torn open. Green fluid that served as its blood sprayed into space, freezing instantly in the vacuum. But Clark wasn't finished. Even as his ship embedded itself in the dying bioship, his crew continued firing at point-blank range. Plasma cannons designed for space combat burned through organic tissue like surgical lasers. The Vorthak vessel thrashed in its death agony, trying desperately to shake off its attacker. Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, reported Clark's damage control officer. Life support is failing and we've lost main power to the port weapons array. Keep firing, Clark ordered calmly. We're not leaving until this thing stops moving. Commander Veltara watched the battle unfold with a mixture of awe and horror. The humans weren't just fighting. They were displaying a level of aggression that seemed almost psychotic. They treated their own ships like expendable weapons, ramming enemy vessels even when it meant certain destruction for themselves. But the most disturbing part was their obvious enjoyment of the combat. Human voices over the communication channels were filled with laughter and battle cries as they engaged enemies that should have terrified any rational being. Sergeant Helen Murphy led her Marine boarding party through the breach Clark's ship had created in the Vorthak bioship. Her squad moved through the creature's pulsing corridors with the efficient brutality of apex predators hunting in familiar territory. The Vorthak drones they encountered were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They looked like insects crossed with machines, with multiple arms ending in weapon tools and compound eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence. They had been designed for efficiency rather than individual combat, but they were still deadly opponents. Murphy's first encounter with a Vorthak drone should have ended badly. The creature was larger, stronger, and armed with bioweapons that could dissolve armor. Instead, Murphy did something that the drone's programming couldn't process. She smiled. "Come on then, ugly," she taunted as she raised her pulse rifle. "Let's see what you've got." The firefight that followed was brief but vicious. Murphy's squad moved with coordinated precision, using cover and suppressing fire like they had been born for urban combat. When her ammunition ran low, Murphy switched to her plasma knife. When that failed, she used her armored fists and the kind of creative violence that only humans seemed capable of. The Vorthak drones, bred for overwhelming numbers and efficiency, couldn't adapt to enemies who seemed to become more dangerous as the situation became more desperate. Their collective intelligence had never encountered a species that treated personal combat as a form of artistic expression. Back on the Wolverine's bridge, Captain Clark coordinated his ship's final assault on the dying bioship while monitoring the larger battle around him. His vessel was critically damaged with hull breaches on 7 decks and life support failing throughout the ship. Any rational crew would have abandoned ship by now. Instead, his people kept fighting with the grim determination of survivors from a world that had tried to kill them every day of their evolutionary history. "Captain," reported his tactical officer, "the bioship's main nervous system is located 3 decks below us. If we can get a boarding party down there, we might be able to kill this thing from the inside." Clark grinned as he watched his Marines fighting their way through the creature's vital organs. "Murphy's already on it, Lieutenant. That woman could find a way to kill a mountain if you gave her enough time." The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships took damage that would have sent alien crews fleeing for escape pods, but they held their positions and kept fighting. When conventional weapons failed, they used ramming attacks. When their hulls were breached, they fought in vacuum suits. When their ships were destroyed, the survivors continued fighting from escape pods and shuttles. The Vorthak biofleet, which had never faced serious resistance from any galactic species, found themselves in their first real fight. Their adaptive capabilities, which had made them nearly invincible against conventional opponents, were useless against enemies who refused to follow conventional tactics. Admiral Hayes watched the battle from her flagship's bridge, with the satisfaction of a hunter watching her pack bring down dangerous prey. Her fleet was taking heavy casualties, but they were inflicting even worse damage on the enemy. More importantly, they were learning. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Foster, "we're receiving damage reports from all ships. The Wolverine is critically damaged but still fighting. The Defiant has lost main power but continues firing on backup systems. The Ranger reports hull breaches on 6 decks but refuses to withdraw." Hayes nodded grimly. This was exactly what she had expected from her people. Humans didn't know how to quit, didn't understand the concept of acceptable losses, and treated impossible odds as a personal insult rather than a reason to retreat. "What about the enemy?" she asked. 17 confirmed kills, Admiral. The remaining bioships are showing signs of hesitation. Their formation is breaking up and several vessels are attempting to withdraw." Hayes smiled with predatory satisfaction. For the first time in galactic history, the Vorthak Empire was facing an enemy that scared them more than they scared their opponents. The tide of the battle turned when Captain Nina Brooks aboard the cruiser UNS Defiant demonstrated the human concept of refusing to die. Her ship had taken a direct hit from a bioplasma cannon that had vaporized half her hull and killed most of her crew. Life support was gone, the main reactor was offline, and the ship should have been a drifting hulk. Instead, Brooks ordered her surviving crew into vacuum suits and continued the fight using manual targeting systems and backup power. For 3 hours, her dead ship continued firing at any Vorthak vessel that came within range. Word of the human victory at Nexus Relay spread through the Vorthak Empire like a virus infecting their collective consciousness. For the first time in their species' history of conquest, they had encountered an enemy that not only survived their assault, but had actually driven them from the battlefield. The bioships that had fled the battle carried with them something the Vorthak had never experienced: fear. The Vorthak collective mind struggled to process what had happened. Their tactical programs, evolved over millions of years of successful conquest, had no framework for understanding enemies who became more dangerous as their situation became more desperate. The humans had violated every principle of rational warfare by treating their own deaths as acceptable outcomes rather than defeats to be avoided. Deep in the biomechanical core of their primary hive ship, the Vorthak overlords replayed the battle data with growing confusion. They watched human vessels continue fighting after sustaining damage that should have destroyed them. They observed human crews operating in conditions that should have been instantly fatal. Most disturbing of all, they detected something in the human communication channels that their translation systems identified as laughter. Major Danny Wright's Special Forces team infiltrated the Vorthak staging area at Kepler-7, 3 weeks after the Nexus battle. What should have been a simple reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence on enemy capabilities became something far more sinister when Wright realized the psychological impact his team could have. "Command, this is Ghost Leader," Wright reported through his encrypted communication system. "We've reached the target zone and these bugs are definitely rattled. Their bioships are clustering together like scared animals instead of spreading out for optimal coverage." Wright and his 12-person team had been inserted via stealth shuttle onto one of the Vorthak forward bases, a living asteroid that served as both a staging area and a breeding ground for their assault creatures. The mission parameters called for observation and intelligence gathering, but Wright saw an opportunity for something much more effective. "Team, new objectives," Wright announced to his squad. "We're going to teach these bugs what human psychological warfare looks like." The campaign that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries. Wright's team didn't just gather intelligence. They turned the Vorthak's own biotechnology against them. They planted micro-explosives in the creature's nerve centers, programmed to detonate at random intervals. They released human-designed viruses that caused the bioships to experience what could only be described as nightmares. But the most effective weapon was fear itself. Wright's team began broadcasting human war songs on Vorthak communication frequencies. They transmitted footage of human Marines laughing as they fought hopeless battles. They sent recordings of human children singing lullabies about death and destruction that human culture considered perfectly normal. The Vorthak collective consciousness, which had assimilated countless civilizations through overwhelming force, found itself listening to enemies who sang while their ships burned around them. Their analytical programs couldn't process the concept of warriors who treated certain death as a source of entertainment rather than terror. Captain Nina Brooks became a legend throughout both fleets when her heavily damaged cruiser UNS Defiant continued, fighting for 6 hours after life support had failed. Her crew operated in vacuum suits, manually targeting weapons while their ship's bioneural network screamed warnings about imminent structural collapse. The aliens who had begged for saviors watched in awe and growing unease as humanity revealed its true nature. Commander Veltara monitored the battle communications from the safety of Kepler Station and heard things that would haunt her dreams for years. "This is Defiant Actual." Brooks's voice crackled over the communication channels as her ship drifted through space with half its hull missing. "We're still in the fight. Repeat, we are still in the fight." "Captain Brooks," Admiral Hayes responded with obvious pride in her voice. "Your ship is showing critical damage across all systems. What's your status?" "Admiral, we've lost main power, life support, and artificial gravity," Brooks replied with a laugh that made the alien observers exchange worried glances. "But we still have manual targeting and backup power for the weapons. These bugs aren't getting past us without a fight." For 6 hours, the dead ship continued firing at any Vorthak vessel that came within range. Brooks and her surviving crew operated their weapons using hand-cranked targeting systems and backup power cells, treating their hopeless situation as just another engineering challenge to overcome. The sight of humans fighting from a ship that should have been a drifting tomb sent waves of confusion through the Vorthak collective consciousness. Their biological programming had no reference point for enemies who refused to acknowledge defeat, even when death was certain. Dr. Elena Martinez, the fleet's chief medical officer, found herself treating casualties that would have been considered impossible by alien medical standards. Human Marines returned to her medical bay with injuries that should have killed them, but they walked in under their own power and asked when they could return to combat. "Doctor," Commander Veltara asked during one of her visits to the human medical facilities, "how is this patient still conscious?" "According to our medical scanners, he has internal bleeding, 3 broken ribs, and severe plasma burns across 40% of his body." Dr. Martinez looked up from treating Sergeant Pete Walker, who was indeed conscious and arguing with the medical staff about returning to active duty. "Commander, this is fairly typical for humans under combat stress. Our bodies produce natural chemicals that suppress pain and enhance performance when we're threatened. But the damage to his internal organs should have rendered him unconscious at minimum," Veltara protested. "Sergeant Walker here took shrapnel through both lungs and kept fighting for another 20 minutes. Dr. Martinez explained casually. That's fairly standard for human Marines. Our training emphasizes staying functional through injuries that would incapacitate most species. Walker grinned at the alien commander despite the medical tubes inserted in various parts of his anatomy. Ma'am, it takes more than a little shrapnel to stop a human Marine. We've got a saying. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. The alien medical staff required sedation after witnessing human medical procedures designed to keep soldiers functional rather than comfortable. The concept of deliberately choosing pain relief over combat effectiveness was so foreign to their peaceful nature that several observers experienced what humans would have recognized as panic attacks. The psychological warfare began organically when human crews started broadcasting their ship names and battle cries on open frequencies. The Vorthak, accustomed to the silent efficiency of their own biomechanical forces, found themselves listening to enemies who announced their presence with names like Death's Head, Planet Killer, and Nightmare. Worse yet, the humans began taunting their enemies during combat. Captain Rick Stone of the destroyer UNS Vengeance became notorious throughout both fleets for his habit of providing running commentary during battles. Attention Vorthak vessels. Stone's voice would boom across all frequencies as his ship engaged multiple enemies. This is Captain Stone aboard the Vengeance. You bugs picked the wrong species to mess with. We've been looking for a good fight and you just volunteered. The Vorthak collective mind tried to analyze the human taunting as a tactical maneuver designed to confuse or distract their forces. They couldn't comprehend that the humans were simply enjoying themselves. The concept of finding pleasure in mortal combat was so alien to their efficient programming that it created processing errors in their analytical systems. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah, Kim's Marine Battalion, perfected the art of making the Vorthak afraid of boarding actions. When bioships attempted to capture human vessels using their traditional swarm tactics, they found themselves facing enemies who had turned close-quarters combat into a form of artistic expression. Remember, Kim would tell her Marines before each boarding action, these bugs think they're the apex predators in this galaxy. Let's show them what real predators look like. The Marines would charge into combat singing human war songs, their voices echoing through the bioship's organic corridors. They fought with a combination of advanced weapons and primitive brutality that confused the Vorthak drones, who had been designed to counter conventional military tactics. When their ammunition ran low, the Marines switched to plasma knives. When those failed, they used their armored fists and the kind of creative violence that only humans seemed capable of. They turned the bioship's own organic architecture against their creators, using acid conduits as weapons and nerve clusters as explosive devices. The Vorthak drones, bred for efficiency rather than individual combat, couldn't adapt to enemies who seemed to become more dangerous as their equipment failed. Their collective intelligence had never encountered warriors who treated personal combat as a form of entertainment. Admiral Hayes coordinated the campaign against the Vorthak Empire with the cold precision of someone who had grown up on a world where every day was a fight for survival. The final battle for the galaxy began in the Vorthak homeworld system, where their primary hive mind coordinated the entire Empire's expansion across a dozen star clusters. The massive biostructure that served as their collective brain floated in the dark space between planets, protected by thousands of bioships and surrounded by defense platforms that had been growing for millions of years. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the tactical displays that showed the enemy's overwhelming numerical advantage. The combined human-alien fleet numbered 200 vessels, impressive by galactic standards but tiny compared to the Vorthak armada that darkened the space around their homeworld. Admiral, Commander Veltara called from her position at the alien liaison station, our scouts report over 3,000 enemy vessels in the target system. Even with our recent victories, these numbers seem impossible to overcome. Hayes smiled with the kind of confidence that could only come from a lifetime of facing impossible odds. Commander, I've learned something over the years about impossible situations. They're only impossible until someone figures out how to do them anyway. The Vorthak collective consciousness watched the approaching enemy fleet with something approaching confusion. Their analysis program suggested that any rational species would have negotiated for peace by now, or at least attempted to find some compromise that would allow mutual survival. Instead, the humans were leading a direct assault on the most heavily defended position in Vorthak space. All ships. This is Admiral Hayes. Her voice carried across the fleet communication channels with calm authority. Today we end this war. Not through negotiation, not through compromise, but through the complete destruction of everything that threatens human space and our allies. The human crews responded with a roar of approval that echoed through every ship in the fleet. After months of fighting, they had finally reached the heart of enemy territory, and their enthusiasm for the coming battle was infectious even to the alien crews fighting alongside them. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding the heavy cruiser UNS Ranger, listened to the battle communications with growing anticipation. His ship had been rebuilt twice since the war began, and his crew bore the scars of dozens of engagements with Vorthak forces. They had learned to fight the bioships with a combination of advanced tactics and primitive savagery that the enemy couldn't counter. Jake, Admiral Hayes called over the private command frequency. I want you to take your task force straight into their outer defense perimeter. Make them think we're going for a frontal assault. Understood, Admiral. Morrison replied with a grin that his crew had learned to recognize as a sign of impending violence. One loud and obvious attack coming up. Marine General Carl Johnson prepared his assault forces for what would be the largest boarding action in galactic history. His Marines had spent months learning to fight inside bioships, turning the Vorthak's own organic architecture against them. They had become specialists in a form of warfare that the galaxy had never seen before. Combat inside living enemies. Listen up. Marines, Johnson addressed his troops over the battalion communication network. Today we're going into the belly of the beast itself. These bugs have been terrorizing the galaxy for months, but they've never faced a full-scale human assault on their home ground. The Marines responded with the kind of battle cry that had terrified enemies throughout human history. They had painted their armor with symbols that would have been considered primitive by galactic standards, but which carried deep meaning for warriors from a deathworld. Skulls, flames, and predators from Earth's ancient past. The battle began with Morrison's feint attack against the outer defense perimeter. His ships dove into the Vorthak formation like bullets, accepting massive damage to create the impression of a desperate frontal assault. The bioships responded as expected, converging on what appeared to be the main human force while leaving gaps in their defensive formation. But the real attack came from an unexpected direction. Admiral Hayes had studied the Vorthak homeworld system for weeks, looking for weaknesses in what appeared to be an impregnable defense. She had found something that the enemy's efficient programming had overlooked: their own predictability. All stealth units, commence Operation Deathworld, Hayes commanded, and 60 human vessels that had been hidden in the system's asteroid field began their approach to the central hive mind. The stealth ships were humanity's newest innovation, vessels designed specifically for fighting biomechanical enemies. Their hulls were coated with materials that mimicked the electromagnetic signatures of space debris, and their crews had been trained to operate in complete silence to avoid detection by organic sensors. Captain Nina Brooks commanded one of the stealth vessels, her ship gliding through the enemy formation like a ghost. Her crew had volunteered for what was essentially a suicide mission, a direct assault on the Vorthak collective consciousness itself. All stealth units. This is Phantom Leader, Brooks reported as her ships closed on their target. We have visual confirmation of the primary hive mind. Beginning final approach. The Vorthak collective consciousness realized the true nature of the human attack only when it was too late to respond effectively. The stealth ships had penetrated their defensive perimeter and were closing on the biostructure that served as their central command node. But even when faced with certain destruction, the humans continued to surprise their enemies. Instead of simply attacking the hive mind with conventional weapons, they did something that violated every principle of rational warfare. They landed on it. Marine General Johnson's assault troops used boarding pods to penetrate the hive mind's organic hull, beginning a battle inside the Vorthak collective consciousness itself. His Marines fought through corridors that pulsed with alien thought, engaging enemies that were literally part of their target's brain. This is Ghost Leader, Major Wright reported from inside the biostructure. We've reached what appears to be a major neural nexus. Beginning placement of charges. The Vorthak collective mind experienced something it had never known in millions of years of existence: physical pain combined with mortal terror. The humans weren't just attacking its body, they were fighting inside its thoughts, turning its own cognitive processes into a battlefield. Sergeant Helen Murphy led her squad through chambers that served as the hive mind's memory banks, destroying millions of years of accumulated knowledge with plasma explosives. Her team moved with the efficiency of apex predators hunting in familiar territory, even though they were fighting inside an alien intelligence that defied human understanding. "Murphy, this is Johnson," the general's voice crackled through her communication system. "Status report." "Sir, we've reached the core processing center," Murphy replied as her squad fought through organic defenses that looked like living nightmares. "These bugs have been busy. Looks like they've got intelligence on half the galaxy stored in here. Destroy it all," Johnson ordered without hesitation. "Leave nothing for them to rebuild with." The systematic destruction of the Vorthak collective consciousness sent shockwaves through their entire empire. Bioships throughout the galaxy began losing coordination as their central command structure collapsed. The perfect efficiency that had made them unstoppable became a weakness when their unifying intelligence was under direct attack. Admiral Hayes coordinated the larger battle from her flagship, watching as the Vorthak defense fleet began showing signs of confusion and fear. Their bioships were still dangerous, but they were no longer operating as a unified force. "Admiral," Lieutenant Foster reported with excitement in his voice, "we're detecting massive system failures throughout the enemy fleet. Whatever our assault teams are doing inside that hive mind, it's working." Hayes smiled with predatory satisfaction. "That's the thing about collective consciousness, Lieutenant. Hit them in the right place and the whole system comes apart." The final phase of the battle was a slaughter. Human ships emerged from their hiding places throughout the system, catching the disorganized Vorthak forces in a coordinated assault that had been planned for months. The bioships, deprived of their central coordination, reverted to individual survival instincts that made them easy targets for human wolfpack tactics. Captain Rick Stone's destroyer UNSC Vengeance led a squadron of human vessels through the heart of the enemy formation, destroying bioships that could no longer coordinate their defenses. His running commentary continued even in the midst of the most intense combat. "Attention remaining Vorthak vessels." Stone's voice boomed across all frequencies as his ships cut through the enemy ranks. "This is Captain Stone. You bugs should have stayed in dark space where you belonged." The Vorthak Empire's collapse accelerated as word of their defeat spread through their communication networks. Bioships in distant systems began shutting down their aggressive expansion, reverting to defensive positions as their collective confidence evaporated. Inside the hive mind, General Johnson's Marines completed their grim work. They had fought through the alien intelligence's deepest thoughts, destroying not just its ability to coordinate the Empire, but its will to continue existing. The collective consciousness that had terrorized the galaxy for months simply gave up.